Moving abroad, living abroad comes with a lot of challenges. And in this video, I want to talk about the 9 biggest challenges I faced in moving to France and living here. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you're new here, welcome. If you enjoy content about moving abroad, life in France, or finding the confidence and courage to live life on your terms, then this is your channel. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell. I'm Patricia Brooks, and in 2018, I left my job and I moved to the south of France to find myself. And it's been an incredible experience. But there have been some challenges along the way. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you about 9 of those. So first off, I studied French a couple of years before I moved to France. The language was the draw for me to move to France. And so I wanted to speak it well. And so when I got here, I had a solid base of French. The problem was I still struggled to communicate in French. And that was because in making this move abroad, I was so far out of my element. I was always nervous or anxious when I was interacting with people and speaking French. And so because of that, I wasn't able to think as clearly as if I were not in such a stress-filled situation. And so that was really frustrating to me because I'd worked so hard to get to the level that I had. You know, like I said, it was a good base of the language. But even in situations that didn't warrant a deep knowledge of the French language, I was fumbling and mixing up words, and it was so frustrating. And, you know, that happens. When we're stressed, we don't think clearly. And when we don't think clearly, we can't function, or our brains can't function the way they normally can. And so that's just to be expected. But for me, it was frustrating. So what did I do to combat that? Well, I did sign up for a French class, a proper French class, and that helped because that started to help me with my level of confidence around speaking French again. But I also started to learn more and improve. So I think that lasted probably the first 6 months, maybe the first 9 months, where I just felt like I was kicking myself for not being better at the language. The second challenge I faced in living in France is the difference in the idea of what appropriate personal space is. And you've heard me talk about this in other videos and subcultural difference videos. But for me, this is something that really kind of it gets to me. It's a visceral sort of thing. And I recognized this the first time I went grocery shopping here in France. I was in line. Somebody was right on my back. I scooted up a couple of steps. They scooted up a couple of steps. I scooted up a couple of steps. They scooted up a couple of steps. So I wasn't able to have that perimeter around myself that I was used to in the United States. And that has been an ongoing challenge for me. I have gotten so much better with this. When I go to the grocery store, before I get in line, I take a deep breath, right? When I'm in line, sometimes I will turn sideways instead of facing forward because for whatever reason, I feel like I have more space that way. And I also am sending out good vibrations to the people who are around me. So instead of feeling annoyed that they're so close to me, I, in my mind, will say peace and love, peace and love. And that calms me down, but it also sends out a different kind of energy. And that has helped me cope with this. But definitely getting better with this. Personal space on the street as well, and people are walking directly toward you and they don't seem to yield. I'm getting so much better at holding my ground. So definitely I'm coming a long way with this, but this was and is a challenge for me still. And I want to say that it is so evident that there are differences in personal space here because during COVID, they would put lines down, markers that showed what an appropriate personal space distance was in both the US and in France. And in the US, it was 2 times the distance as it was in France. So that gives you a clue that, yeah, there are definitely cultural differences around that. Number 3 has to do with mail and delivery services. In the United States, the mail is pretty good. Delivery services are pretty good. If I ordered something from Amazon in the US, I'd get it very, very quickly. Here, in France with some mail, with some of my packages, I don't get them, or I don't get them quickly. So there's the problem, number one, of things just not being delivered. And then there's a problem of things being delivered more slowly. And this is something that I have come to terms with. I recognize that this is a possibility. But one of the things I do to combat that is anytime I order something or I'm expecting something in the mail, I think about my mailbox and I see it, I envision it with the thing that I've ordered. I kind of set an intention that it will be delivered, right? And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But what that does for me is it reduces the stress of thinking about the thing that I don't want to happen, which is, oh, it's not going to be delivered, just like that other package and that other package. And I don't want it to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I work to envision the positive outcome that I'm looking for. That has helped me cope with that as well. Now, number 4 has to do with a slower pace of life, but in a different kind of way. Here where I am living in the south of France, the sun rises much later in the fall than it did in Richmond, Virginia, 45 minutes to an hour later. So my first year here, my second year here, I couldn't figure out why I was sleeping so late. And I was feeling lazy, right? This goes to the productivity mindset that I gained in the United States. But I felt like I was being lazy because I was sleeping in the fall. And then one day it occurred to me, Patricia, there's something different here. The sun is usually up much earlier, or was in the United States, in Richmond. And so I checked my phone to see when sunrise was in Richmond and when sunrise was in Perpignan. And a 45-minute to an hour difference in that, right? So that kind of got me off the hook. I still was thinking, oh yeah, but I need to be up and being more productive sooner. But that was something that I found challenging probably into my third year, even after I knew that that was a thing. I hadn't really settled into a more relaxed way of life as I have now. So have you experienced any of the things I have spoken about thus far? If so, give this video a thumbs up. Now, number 5 has to do with something that I realized probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. And that was that the things that I find inconvenient or not to my liking here in France are things that I'm going to have to continue to deal with. And in the beginning, those things weren't so hard to deal with because my life here was new and novel. And those things were new and novel as well. But, year after year of accepting something that is different and less convenient can get to you. And I got to a point where I realized, oh, Patricia, you know what? If you stay here longer, you're going to have to come to terms with this. You're going to have to go from a place of tolerating some of the things that you find inconvenient to a place of accepting them, fully accepting them, and knowing that is part of living here in France. You got to take the good with the bad. So, for example, you might be asking yourself, what are you talking about? What inconveniences? Well, having to hang my clothes on a line instead of throwing them in a dryer. And what that means is if I have some heavy clothes like jeans and I want to wear them, I've got to think about that a couple days in advance so that the jeans are dry when I'm ready to wear them. It means that, if I open the windows and get some fresh air, I'm also going to get some flies or bugs in my house. Now, these two things are something that I think I can fix once I buy my own house, but still, it was something that I was tolerating, and now I am accepting that. But it took me that realization that, Patricia, this is what you signed up for, and those things pale in comparison to the life you now have, the experiences you are living. And so just move past that, don't harp on it, and accept the good with the bad. And that is what I've done. But that was not something that I was challenged with in the beginning, but later on, it was something that did bother me. Now, number 6 has to do with taxes. Now, I feel like I'm spending 9 months of the year dealing with taxes because I file a U.S. tax return. That takes me through March or April, right? And then come May, I've got to file a French tax declaration. And that gets filed by June, I'm good. But 2 months later, the end of August, I get something from the tax office saying that either they've accepted, my return as is, or they don't agree and they tell me what they think is wrong with it. In which case I have to go to my tax accountant and say, oh, this is what they said is wrong. And like, oh, no, they don't understand. She writes a blurb that I send to them and it typically fixes it. But now we're into September and I'm still dealing with taxes, right? So that is something that I find challenging because taxes just aren't something that I love to do or like to think about. But that's a challenge. Number 7 is a big one. Anytime that you make a move abroad, you have to get a resident permit or a visa. That allows you to stay in the country for a certain amount of time. Now, the visas I had in the beginning, the first 3 years, were a visitor visa, which I had to renew on an annual basis. So that meant that I had to prove to the government that I was worthy of staying for another year. And the first renewal was okay. It was still a little bit stressful. It always is. But like the second time I renewed, it was like, this thing again. And it felt like I had just gotten approved. And here it was time for me to think about this thing again, set my appointment, pull the papers together. And it was starting to feel a little more stressful because I was living on my savings, showing my savings were the proof that I could support myself financially. And that was dwindling because I wasn't working. And so that started to feel hard to me. So then the following time I applied for a visa was for a business visa, profession liberal visa, so I could start my business. So that was a different kind of work to do because I had to create a business plan. And I did that. And I submitted my plan and the visa paperwork, and that got approved. And that was a relief. I was like, okay, I can start making money now. I don't have to necessarily worry about my savings dwindling to zero. But still, I had the following year to renew my visa. And so it felt like I was always renewing my visa, always trying to prove myself. And once I renewed that visa, I wasn't sure how many years they were going to give me. Were they going to give me a year? Were they going to give me 2 years? Were they going to give me no years? Or were they going to give me 4 years? And I came away from that process with 4 years. And that was such a load off. I was just like, oh my God, I don't have to do this thing for another 4 years. Thank you, Jesus. That was a hard thing to do every year, having to prove that you belong in the country. Along with that is just being a foreigner and sometimes being treated a little bit differently. Going to the prefecture and having the security guard who stands outside and checks your paperwork to see if you have an appointment, who is a little bit gruff or a little bit assertive. It doesn't give you warm fuzzies. It doesn't make you feel welcomed. Another example of this is with my cell phone plan. My first year was fine. My landlord helped me put me on his plan, so I didn't have to worry about it. But my second year, I had to figure that on my own. And because I didn't have this justificative domicile for a few months in my second year, the company said, oh no, we can't give you one. So when I finally got that in the form, the justificative domicile in the form of my renter's insurance, I went back to the cell phone store and said, I'm ready to get a plan where I don't have to pay for a card every single month to re-up my minutes. And they said, fine, you can do it, but you have to pay 250 euros as a deposit because I didn't have a European Union passport. I'm like, what? I have this thing you've been asking for all along. Yeah, but. And so that made me feel like I was kind of foreign as well. So those are a couple of other things that made me feel like I always had to prove myself before. Now, that is not such a big issue, but it was a challenge in the beginning. Number 8 is a big one too. And I think this was the biggest challenge I faced. And that was in my first year. I got here and I was just beside myself. I was on cloud 9 that I had actually pulled it off, that I had made a move to France, that I was living in France. And that lasted for a whole 2 weeks. And then I thought to myself, maybe I'd made a mistake. And this was all in my head. It was all thoughts. Oh, Patricia, what have you done? It wasn't the feeling I had that, oh, I had made a bad decision. It was just, the logic coming up. You're in France. You don't have a job. How are you going to be able to pull this off long term? You don't know anybody. All of these negative thoughts and thoughts of how just crowded my mind. And this was hard because this lasted for a good 6 or 7 months where I was questioning this move. And it was bad because I wanted to really experience France. I wanted to explore and feel like I felt those first 2 weeks because that was just amazing. But these thoughts really threatened that. And so what I did, I used some of the tools I learned in coach training to talk myself off the ledge. But I kept having to do that or swat those thoughts away so that I could experience the kind of life I wanted here in that first year. And I would have to just shift the thought from is what have you done to, oh no, Patricia, your intuition told you to get here and you've done the right thing. And that shifted my thought, that shifted the energy, that shifted what I did. I didn't lie in bed all day, but I went out and I explored, right? That shifted how I showed up in my first year. But like I said, it was this constant struggle, this tug of war, this back and forth that felt hard. And I'll tell you, I'm so glad that I was able to talk myself off the ledge because then that allowed me to think, oh, well, Patricia, one of the reasons that you are struggling with this is because you don't have your next step. You don't have your next project. You spent so much time planning to get to France and now you have all this free time. Of course, your mind is going crazy. You don't have anything to do. And so that allowed me to start my podcast. That allowed me to say, oh, Patricia, you need to take a French class. And so having been able to shift that energy and those thoughts allowed me to move through my first year in a way that felt better to me. And being able to work through those feelings of self-doubt or fear or whatever comes up for you is something that is indispensable when you have made a move abroad. All right. And there was a bit of loneliness around that self-doubt too, because I didn't have a partner to share this information with. I didn't even really know anybody else who had made a move abroad that I could talk to about to see if they had experienced that too. So it was really all on me. And number 9 has to do with loneliness. So there were those periods of time where I was, wished I had somebody who I could share this with because I had friends back at home, but they couldn't really understand what I was going through. And I didn't really want to burden them with the thought of, oh my gosh, she's not doing well, or make them think that, oh, maybe she did make a mistake. And then that would further my fears. So there's that kind of loneliness, but there was another kind of loneliness as well. And one example of it was I was dating a French guy for 9 months. And during that 9 months, we had the 2020 US presidential election. And one of the things he did was he signed my absentee ballot for me. And so he was really excited about what the outcome was going to be. And we didn't have a result until a few days later. And he was the one who told me, that Biden had won. And he was really excited. And I was excited too. But I wasn't excited in the way he thought I would be, right? And he sensed that. And he said, what's wrong? Why aren't you happier? And I said, well, I'm really happy that it went the way it did. But there are 70 million people who didn't see what I saw in the other candidate. And that was disheartening because I don't like to think of my country or many, 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 many people in my country as being cold or have the same views or believe that some of the actions that were taken were okay, were an okay way to behave. And that felt really hard. And so in that moment, even though I had somebody who I was really close with, I felt lonely. I felt lonely in that moment. So that's another type of loneliness as well. So those are the 9 things I found most challenging in living here in France. Which one are you most surprised about? Let me know in the comments. Now, one of the things that I experienced when I got here in those first 2 weeks and in the months that followed was I felt really ecstatic about my having made this move abroad and what that could mean for my life. And I also had the challenge of that self-doubt, of the frustration with the language, even though I knew I could speak it better than I was showing, right? All of those things, and I had to deal with all by myself. So having been trained as a coach and needing a way to support myself here, I decided that I was going to start a business to help single women who are just like me, who wanted to move abroad, but weren't necessarily sure they could pull it off, and who would want the help and encouragement of like-minded women who were going through the same thing or who had made their moves abroad so that they would have a place to talk about what they were dealing with. And so that's why I created the Carefree Expat Incubator. It's a program that helps you not only plan and prepare for your move abroad, but once you are abroad, you still have access to all of the program's benefits. And so you can get on a coaching call. And if you have an experience like I had 3 weeks in, and we can help you move through that process so you don't feel all alone. If that sounds like something that would be beneficial to you, if you'd like to learn more about that, check out the link in the description, schedule a time to talk with me, and I can't wait to hear what your plans are to move abroad. All right? So I hope you found this video helpful, insightful. If you did, be sure to like it, share it with friends, subscribe, and you might be interested in these videos up here to watch next. That is all I have for you today. Bye for now.